What up, guys? Prince Sports back at you again. And don't forget to comment, like, subscribe. I want to talk about Charles Barkley. He's back at it again. He was on a recent interview, and he said his top 7 players, which is okay. Anybody's entitled to their own list and ranking their own players. And then he made a couple statements that I thought was a little far-fetched and a little overrated. And I want to break down some of them comments that he said. All right, let's go over his first list, which was his top 7, right? Number 1 is Michael Jordan. I got no problem with that. That's cool. Number 2 is Oscar Robertson. Now, if you ask my grandfather, he would tell you he's a big sport guy too. I mean, sports run deep in my family. We all have a sport background. If you ask my grandfather, he would tell you Oscar Robertson is the best player to ever pick up a basketball. And I told him, the OG, you may be right, but that's something I can't really relate to because I haven't been watching that guy play. And to have somebody ranked number 1 or in your top 5, I think you have to at least have some impact on you. You have to at least have them in your top 5 that you watched. You have to actually have some type of connection to them to rank them in your top 5, other than just going by stats or what people say. I think that's kind of a hard thing to do, to put a player in your top 5 when you don't have much of a relationship with them or seeing them. Sometimes I don't think highlights and stats is enough for you to say that's your top 5 player. But okay, fine. Number 3, he had Bill Russell, Walt Chamberlain, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Okay, he has all of those guys tied at number 3, 4, 5. I guess he mixed them all up together. He on his interview, he didn't really jump down to those guys by giving them numbers. He didn't say which one was 3, 4, or 5. I don't understand what he meant by that. But I guess he's just going in that rotation. So let's just say his top 5 is Bill Russell, Kareem, Walt Chamberlain, Oscar Robertson, Michael Jordan. Okay, those are a lot of guys that come from his era, or guys that he watched playing before he became a pro basketball player. Okay, I got no problem with that a little bit, but I think some of those guys on his list been surpassed. Bill Russell, to me, is not a top 5 player all time. You can't be a top 5 player all time to me if you show up on one end of the floor, but you kind of not that great on scoring. And I know what some people say, if you put Bill Russell in today's era, he would score 25 a game. If he couldn't score 25 a game in that era, and a lot of people say, eras of the past is more physical and all this other stuff. If he couldn't do it then what makes you think that he could do it now? His offensive skill set still wouldn't be as polished. Even if he came in today's league and he was taught by a lot of advanced metrics from his era affecting to this era, it still wouldn't work out. Let's say he was born in the 80s or 90s and he started playing basketball today, whatever, or the early 2000s. He would have been brought up in the type of culture that some of us been brought up in, but at the same time, that still doesn't diffuse the fact that he still will most likely be a defensive force, but offense, he wouldn't have it. I can't pick a guy in my top 5 if he's lacking that category. Kareem is in my top 5. I got no problem with that. That's cool. Then he slide off to the second tier. So he seems to be giving the 2000s generation players the second tier line. He had Kobe at 6, and he got LeBron at number 7. And I guess he's going to have Tim Duncan and all them other guys, Shaq, all them other guys round off the second line of great players. I think you can't do that because basketball, you can't just Charles Barkley has a little bit of bias. He just keeps putting any player from the past as being a top 5 player. I don't think you could do that because things do get surpassed. Okay, times do change, and a couple years from now, people are going to be. I notice a lot of generations tend to disrespect the next one. So when this generation is over, the generation that's currently playing, they will say this generation sucked. And guys like LeBron, KD, well, wasn't nothing compared to players we got now. People will say that as time goes by. So without putting it in perspective, and this is what I like doing because I notice generation from generation, people tend to disrespect. And that's one thing I don't like. I think you should respect each generation as it comes along. There's no need to seriously go about disrespecting it because during that time and that era, that's what was called for. Okay? And if you was to zap those same players into the past with those same circumstances, a lot of their skill set would be wiped away because they wouldn't be able to do some of the things that they do now. It's just a simple fact. Like James Harden does. I tell people constantly, James Harden does Euro, step back. These things weren't really allowed in the 90s. Those was considered travel. I don't think a lot of people know that. A Euro step was banned in the 90s. All right? That came involved in the NBA when European players in the 2000s brought that to the NBA, and the NBA allowed the rule for players to start doing Euro steps and stuff like that. But that move, the Euro step, was always allowed in overseas, but it wasn't allowed in the United States. Players started catching notice. The league started catching notice of it, and they said, you know what? Let's just add this to our repertoire and add this part of the game of basketball, what you got today. So you have to put that in perspective too. And he also has some comments about LeBron. As usual, players are always going to have to critique LeBron. His comments about LeBron was, which I think is real. Just listen to this. I do think the way they played the game today, and he has LeBron's name highlighted. LeBron did not want any part of the bad boy Pistons. Charles Barkley says those guys were trying to hurt people. And I used to tell people, if you play the Detroit Pistons, you have to call your family and tell them that you love them because you may never see them again. Okay, that's a little over. It's just basketball, man. That's a little over exaggerated with the comment, first of all. Number two, the Detroit Pistons didn't beat everybody, didn't beat people by just playing physical defense, okay? They had the highest scoring game in NBA history. They were they're the first team in NBA history that have a backcourt Hall of Fame team. They beat you by just playing basketball the right way with a little bit, with some form of playing defense, They took advantage of the rules of basketball, but you can't win a championship by just knocking people over and smacking them in the face and doing all this other stuff. I think people kind of get caught up in the Detroit Pistons and try to degrade them a little too much. People haven't seen them play, think all they were about was just physical defense. Keep in mind, the whole era was about physical defense, okay? The Pistons got beat up by the Celtics a lot of times. Isaiah Thomas had elbows to the face, bloody lips. He had a black eye from an elbow, I believe, from Kevin McHale. So the Pistons were getting beat up too. All these teams were playing each other physical and rough. The Lakers and the Celtics was a war zone. They were playing each other physical and rough. That just was what the era was calling for, okay? That doesn't mean that people went out there looking deliberately to hurt you, and the Pistons went on the basketball court with a gun, and won the game by just shooting people. It wasn't like that. They actually did play basketball too. Okay, they actually could score too. So keep that in mind. a lot of teams play like the Pistons. The only difference is the Pistons got the bad boy reputation a little more because of their behavior and the way they act, and they kind of embrace that, you know. But that comment within itself is overstated. LeBron James will have more than enough to handle the Detroit Pistons. Depending on what team he is, he still would have got his numbers, though. You know, you guys can't. Here's the the bias in a lot of people, right? They say most people would tell you LeBron's in their top 5 or top 10, right? But then turn around and tell you Dennis Rodman would shut down LeBron James. Stacey Augmon will put the clamps on, LeBron James. Role players will put the clamps on LeBron James. But you got him in your top 5 and top 10. If that's the case and you feel that way, why you got him in your top 10 or top 5? That don't make no damn sense, you know? If that's the case, then remove him from your top list, because if you're saying that he can't handle Dennis Rodman, but you got him already ranked above Dennis Rodman, how does that make any sense? How is he better than Dennis Rodman if you just sit there and say Dennis Rodman would beat him? Think about it, you know? A lot of guys on YouTube do the same thing. They keep talking about players and say, oh, I like this player. He's my top 5 player. But you continuously take a dump on him. All right? That's a form of hate and bias, but you're trying to neglect the fact that you are a hater. Okay? A lot of guys do this. If you want a perfect example, I don't want to say his name because I don't want to put him on the spot like that, but the other guy that talks about LeBron James a lot, and critiques just about everything he does, he has LeBron in his top 5, allegedly, right? But then goes about saying LeBron's this, LeBron's that, but you have him in your top 5, and he can't be compared to other players in your top 5. That doesn't make any sense. If he's in your top 5, he's more than enough compatible with the other players you have in your top 5. That don't make any damn sense. If that's the case, then take him off. You can't have it both ways. Either he's an all-time great to you or he's not. I don't get some of these people sometimes because you're not making any sense at all. But I'll leave it off at that. Peace.